Welcome to OmniFocus Workflows with Beck Tench, and it's really great to have Beck here today. I'm really intrigued to hear more about her OmniFocus setup and all of the other components of her productivity system. And before we get to that, just a little bit of an intro. First of all, if you're brand new to learn OmniFocus, you're very welcome, and thanks for either joining here live or watching a recording of this session. Learn OmniFocus just celebrated its 5th anniversary earlier this month, so it's great to see it going stronger than ever over 5 years later. And the goal from the beginning has been to support people all over the world in living a fulfilling and productive life with some help from OmniFocus and complementary apps. And we're going to be seeing some complementary apps today as well. So it's really a way of teaching productivity principles and best practices. And sometimes people get stuck when they learn the practices but aren't quite sure how to apply them. And since OmniFocus is my favorite personal task manager, this is the one I chose to focus the site on and to give some tangible help in terms of taking all of that great theory and those great principles and actually putting them into practice. So we've had people join from all over the world. They're almost up to 80 countries now, and I've had contact with many of the members, and if I haven't had contact with you yet, I hope to see you at one of the live sessions in the future. It's always great to put a face to a name. So what we're going through now is one of the components of Learn OmniFocus Live, and I'll just briefly talk about what this looks like. So we have theme sessions, so we talk about certain things like traveling with OmniFocus 3 was a recent one, navigating the day, how you can use it as you go through the day. And we've got some more theme sessions coming up. I've got many more planned, and I'll mention a couple of those in just a moment. And then just as we have today, I love bringing workflow guests on to Learn OmniFocus Live. And there's many different ways to use OmniFocus, and I think it can really help to see examples of how people are using it day to day and for their life and their work. And it's not to say that you're going to necessarily use it exactly the same way as someone else, but as you go through these workflow sessions, take the pieces that work for you, take some inspiration. I know I always do when we have workflow guests on. There's always something little to think about a little bit differently, a little accent to add to it. Maybe it's even just a couple more tags or naming things a little bit differently. So these are a great opportunity for you to see OmniFocus in action. I also really love doing these small group Learn OmniFocus office hour sessions, and these are all video conferenced. We use the Zoom online meeting platform, and this is a chance to meet other people who have an interest in productivity and OmniFocus, and to keep everything confidential. These specifically aren't recorded, unlike the other sessions, and you're welcome to come and share anything OmniFocus related. You can even share your screen as you go through and talk about what's working and what's not working about your system and your workflows. And something I've been doing, I guess, for a few years before Learn OmniFocus started. It's for about 8 or 9 years now. I've been doing private coaching and consulting with people around the world, and this is continues to be a real passion of mine. And so if you want to take a really deep dive and have some one-on-one assistance, you're very welcome to check that out. learnomnifocus.com/private. Okay, and just before I hand it over to Beck, just a little sneak peek of what's coming. The next live session is called Start Smart with OmniFocus 3. And this is a real back to basics. So even if you've never used OmniFocus before, this is a great session to attend. So we'll go right from kind of taking OmniFocus out of the box. We'll look at it on all the various platforms, including OmniFocus for the web that was introduced very recently. And even if you've been using OmniFocus for years, this could be a great opportunity to go back to basics and reimagine your use of OmniFocus. And if it has gotten more complicated than you'd like, maybe this is part of your reset and part of keeping it nice and simple. And OmniFocus can be used in a very simple way. It can be used in a very complex way. And sort of part of the process is deciding where on that spectrum you want to structure your system. So do you need a more elaborate system, or can you get away with something simpler? And the follow-up to that one is called Beyond the Basics. That'll be on August 14th. And between the Start Smart and Beyond the Basics, we'll cover pretty much all of the features in OmniFocus across all of the different platforms. And Beyond the Basics, as the name implies, we'll get into more advanced features like advanced perspectives and And repeating actions, there's many different ways to have things repeat, custom notifications, those sorts of things. We'll even look at a little bit about installing scripts and how Siri shortcuts fit in. So you're very welcome to attend one or both of those. And then there's 5 office hour sessions open for registration. There's still space currently in each of these, and I've tried to have the times be such that wherever you are in the world, hopefully there'll be at least 1 or 2 that you're able to join in on. If you're going to be at Macstock, I'll be there. It's July 27th and 28th near Chicago. Should be a really fun conference. So if you're going to be there, definitely say hi, or maybe send me an email ahead of time to let me know you're going to be there, and it'd be great to meet you in person. A couple of things that Apple announced recently. There's a long list of announcements, but iOS 13 is one of the big ones. It's a major upgrade especially for the iPad. With iPad has their own OS now, iPad OS. And the Omni Group are already working on plans to support these features, which is very much in OmniFocus's nature, is to support new features, often even on day one as soon as they become available. I think the most interesting one for the iPad OS will be able to put multiple perspectives on screen at once. So you could have like your inbox on the left side of the screen and maybe your projects on the right. And I think this will make it very helpful. So we'll be looking forward to covering all these advancements leading up to the release of iOS 13 and iPadOS. And similarly, there's some great updates coming to macOS in the form of Catalina, and I'll be keeping a close eye on those and look forward to sharing some content right around the time that Catalina launches. And without further ado, pleased to introduce Beck Tench. Beck's someone I connected with initially through the OmniFocus forums, and she's a very active participant on those forums. And I happened to check out her website and was really fascinated with her approach. So I'm really happy that she agreed to be a guest here today. She lives in Bainbridge Island in Washington State in the US, and that's very close to Seattle. If you're ever in Seattle, I definitely recommend taking the ferry over. You'll get some beautiful views of Seattle from the ferry, and the Bainbridge Island is, from my one visit there, is just a wonderful, relaxing place to be, and I definitely look forward to going back for future trips. And Beck wears many hats. She's an experienced researcher. She's a PhD student, a teacher, and I think safe to say definitely a student of life and very creative individual. Especially if you're in academia, I recommend checking out her academic workflows, and she'll be talking about some of those today, and that's on her website, becktench.com. And then she also has an active blog there, and I think there's much of interest, even if you're not in the academic space. There's a lot to learn from what she has to share. And you can also follow her on Twitter. It's @10, so @10ch, @10ch. Okay, and without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Beck.
I think the first thing that I want to share is just a tiny bit about that student of life researcher description, because I feel like it's definitely going to inform how you understand my approach. And maybe before even saying that, I want to say that my approach is one that is as me as possible. So I don't assume that sharing this OmniFocus organizational scheme is going to be something that will work for you, but maybe what it will do is inspire you to make your OmniFocus theme as you as possible. You'll see a lot of redundancy and messiness in my approach, and that redundancy helps me learn and remember, so I value it, and the messiness allows for a serendipity of connection, which is very important to me. So thinking about, in our world of being focus nerds, I feel like it can kind of orient us towards being very efficient and very productive. And actually a lot of my student of life orientation is towards really challenging those notions and to better understand where I can just basically be aware of life as I'm living it, and that being enough, and not necessarily checking things off a list is where I'm headed. So just kind of wanted to orient us to that, and yeah, I hope you can't hear. I don't know if you can hear like chickens going crazy. I hope we're not having. I think maybe an egg was just laid up. We're not having
okay. Yeah, hearing a bit in the background, okay. But it kind of adds to the atmosphere. I think.
Okay. All right. Let's hope what we still have are all the chickens when this is over with. Okay. So the first thing I want to share is a bit about my organization in projects. So we'll just make everything small for a second. So I, a few months ago, had this insight while I write morning pages from The Artist Way. I've been writing it for about 10 years. And I was looking at the pantry while I was writing morning pages, and I had this insight that I wanted it to feel, when I went to OmniFocus, like it feels when I look at my pantry. And I love to cook. And so when I look at my pantry, I see just so much possibility. And I really hope that the chickens are okay. I see lots of possibility with what I can make. And I never feel like I have to just go to my pantry and cook something because it's there. So I wanted OmniFocus to feel like I could go to it and be inspired to do things instead of go to it and feel like I just had a whole bunch of stuff I needed to cook. And so part of that insight got me to reconsider the practice of mapping areas of responsibility, kind of per GTD, and actually look at what would it look like to map areas of possibility. And so I went through that exercise, and I kind of looked at the person I wanted to become, and I looked at the things that were important to her and described her life. And then I started organizing my OmniFocus projects under those observations. So the person that I want to become sees life as the precious thing that it is. And so one of my folders is Life is Precious. And they have a few things that, we all have our baggage from living life, and I have a few things that I feel I'm actively healing. And that person that I look towards the future to, she is healed in certain ways. And so I created a folder called Healing Happens. I also made the observation that that person is a writer because I love the day-to-day experience of writing. And so I have folders, The Writing Life and The Courage to Teach, which are phrases that evoke those qualities from her. So For and With is about service and volunteering. And then there's reference and routines, which are just sort of just descriptors. But my projects are organized by the life I want to live into. I'm feeling, very distracted because of the chickens, so I apologize. So I also have this phrase, be a good, which is a project where I have created, and this is something I've been doing for quite some time, the different roles I have in life and how I can live into those roles in kind of a it's not about being better so much as it is being fully the thing I want to be. And so right now what we're seeing is the contents of Be a Good, and I have my different roles, and I'll just show you a couple of examples. Under Be a Good Beck, I have a few things that I've got to do. One is sort of an errand. Another is a is a practice that I've started, which is to ask my future self questions and answer them in OmniFocus. So I just started this last week, and it repeats every week. So on Friday, I'll answer it again. But it's just, who have you enjoyed interacting with? And I answer it in the notes. And so when I go to answer it again, I will just put something there, and that will accrue. So every week I can reference that. I use the notes in OmniFocus a lot. Like, for example, here's my New Yorker caption contest entry, which I was pretty proud of. I really think this will be more motivating than the hamster wheel in the basement. And so I actually keep track of my captions so that I can look at them as time goes on. So that's actually something I submitted this morning. So I have various things that I have in these different folders, and so life is precious. There's a way that language creates the name of the projects, and sometimes they don't exactly match. So like Life is Precious has a project called Get Wool Pants Hemmed that doesn't really feel like life is precious, but it still has generally a kind of like tone of appreciation. But sometimes I have projects that don't have that tone that still go into the Life is Precious folder. Healing happens. So here's a good example of, I have one of my goals in Healing Happens is to soften, literally just be a softer, more relaxed person. And so I have some things that are like actual tasks to do there. But I also have a list of things. For example, I want to be an open person, and this is just a set of reminders as to what keeps me open to things. So writing every day, going on walks where I don't have an intention of exercise or even direction as to where I'll go, cooking, drawing, watercoloring. And so it's just a way to remind myself, and I use OmniFocus actually a lot to remind myself. So now we get to stuff that feels more like work. So the writing life is where and let's see. Yeah, actually this will do. I have sort of different projects. So like here, I'm going to click all so we can see some stuff that's completed. Here we have a project that I just completed, which was the general exam, a comprehensive exam for a PhD program. And I have various lists. I wanted to show you this list here. This is my reading list. And so what I have in the reading list, this used to be a perspective, but the perspective, for some reason, I was looking at it last night and I deleted it. I have all the things that I read for this general exam in this list. And then if I open up the notes, I see a note as to why I added this to the reading list, and I also have a link that takes me to DevonThink and shows me the reading itself, and so I was able to read that way. And the other thing that I would do is let's see, if we focus on this, we could probably get to a similar perspective as to what I had. So what I would do is I could well, that didn't work. But what I used to be able to do is I could, in my perspective, I would be able to sort by quick reads, skimming, long reads, typical reads, and that sort of thing to decide what to read. So I used this perspective as a real working space to figure out what to read. And then once I figured it out, I could just, I have the little shortcut where I hit caps lock G for go, and it will open up the.
Just to interject for a moment there, I think maybe your tags are not set to show all your all items. So when you switch to tags, that's why nothing showed up there. So if you go into the view settings.
Oh, thanks, Tim.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. So this is what it looked like, and I would be able to see what was available from what I had left, and then decide for what I had time for, what I would read. Typical read for my math is about an hour's worth of reading. Great, thanks for that. So this is just a good example of a very specific kind of use in OmniFocus that I found really, really nice. And I want to go into another specific example in just a minute about creating a syllabus in a different way that I have been using it. I keep notes to self, as you'll see, they're all tagged note to self around ideas that I have. For publications, for dissertation, anytime I have a funding opportunity or fellowship or something, I'll put a note, and if it has a deferred or due date, I'll put that in there. This is a journal entry that I'm going to submit, like a paper I'm going to submit to a journal, and I'm just starting to do, I've already written the bulk of the paper, but I'm just starting to do, like, how do I transition what I've written into a specific paper for this special call for papers. So that's sort of what the writing life is looking like. I'm going to go back to remaining and show you the other example, which was around teaching. So I'm teaching a course this summer, and I have to create a syllabus for it. And so I wanted to tell you what that looked like. So for a really long time, I had this this project called Class Notes, and I just put every idea that I had about this course that I'm teaching in that. So for months, anytime I had an idea. So for example, one day I realized I may need to introduce this one author, Velour, before introducing this other author, Gillespie. That's just a thought I had one day, and I needed to remember it so that when I went to create the syllabus, I put her before him. Here's another note that this crash course in design thinking video might be interesting for the students to watch, so I just put it there. So I had a ton of notes like this, as you can see. And what I did, and this is where we'll jump over to tinderbox, which is a tool I use for lots of different things. So I created, I have kind of a small monitor right now, so let's see. I'll zoom out a bit. I created a little 9-week, 2-day-a-week, template for tinderbox. And I started to just, every time I had a note in OmniFocus, and we could just look at here's Velour, that's one of the notes that we saw earlier, I created a little note. So it would just be as simple as double clicking, let's just say Gillespie. And I created several prototypes so that I could color code really quickly, whether something was a reading, a lecture, assignment, studio, or something like that. This is a design class. So this would be a reading, so I just do that. And so now I can plot, Gillespie after Velour, and maybe it will put Gillespie in this class, which is week 3 on a Monday, that kind of thing. So what I did was I went through every single one of these OmniFocus ideas, and any one that needed to become an element of the class, I just put up here, just a whole bunch of popcorn populated notes at the top. And then I started dragging them to different classes, each one of these squares, different class, and connecting them so that I better understood how the course would shape out. Once I got to a certain place, oh, and I should also say that some of them have notes to them. So for example, they have go along. I know that one has a note. Well, here's something. I an activity that when they form teams, I want them to go out and do something fun with their team. And I wanted to remember that when I have them go out and do something fun, the evidence that they actually have completed that would be a photo that they could post to a collaborative scrapbook that we have as a class. So I would put things in the notes section for some of these ideas if I needed more stuff to remember. So after I, kind of map most of it out in tinderbox, but it's not like totally solid, but still pretty good, feeling pretty good about it. And I can like technically go to the next step, which is a syllabus. Then I would go to Google Docs, which is, here's the syllabus in Google Docs. And I would start mapping out what every single class was based on the tinderbox file. So then once I have all of this stuff mapped out, that was just, some serious work to make a really nice narrative arc for the whole course and get everything in terms of goals and due dates and how you grade and all that kind of stuff. So I get that. So then I go back to OmniFocus and I start listing out all the things. So I have in this Google Doc, I have a whole bunch of lectures. And so I just went through all the lectures and I created an item for every single lecture. I did the same for every single discussion, every single studio, so that now I know what I have to do. So we have this this assignment called the process book, which is basically a collaborative Google Slides document that every student will put a different slide in to show the evidence of their work. And so I've started to create these. And so here's what I was working on yesterday. It's of maps where students have to go and they have to find an example of a map. And so I have a link to the process book assignment, and I can, access it directly from OmniFocus to work on it. And then once it's done, I will check it off, but I've still got a little bit of tweaking to do. So, so I thought that was a nice example of like the back and forth way that I can like remember things, because for me, OmniFocus is very much a memory bank. I often will just tell Siri, remind me to, and then I'll just collect things in my inbox, and then I will do kind of some more significant notes work in OmniFocus to make sure that that reminder becomes a real trigger for memory. A good example of this is actually in my reference projects. So for example, every time I reserve a book for the library, from the library, I make a note as to why I wanted to reserve that book, because I won't remember. And so so for example, I wanted to skim Design for the Real World to learn more about the responsible design movement. That was a specific thing. Someone recommended a book via Twitter, and so I wanted that information all the way down to who recommended a certain kind of book, or why I want to read a book to understand a concept. So I have that, and often I will create notes as to like when I requested something, or something a little bit more in depth, depending on what it is. This would be a good example. Oh, well, I was wondering if I had a good example of some good context, but I can't find one right now. So in general, I have these reference files that I add to, and they're all notes to self. A great example of that is in my Someday Maybe. Just before, maybe 2 weeks ago, I had a project in here that said, here's an OO, that stands for Omni Outliner, document about this t-shirt company idea that you have, because I have an idea to do a t-shirt company. And so I decided that I wanted to do something about it since the school year was over and I had a little bit of extra time. And so I moved that into an actual project, which is here. And what I ended up doing, I think you could see. So here was the Omni Outliner document. which was just over time, I would add to this and kind of collect ideas. The t-shirt idea is to basically have like a cutout looking image of a famous person like Mr. Rogers or Maya Angelou, and then a really pithy but inspirational quote, and the idea that that would spark a positive interaction between you and a stranger. So for example, Julia Child's t-shirt might say, "You can fix it." And so I didn't just copy and paste the OmniOutliner file into OmniFocus. I referenced the OmniOutliner file to create different projects in OmniFocus. And so here are my like possible Mr. Rogers quotes, for example, and an example of a tutorial to use to create the file that the image of that person's face and that sort of stuff. So that's sort of an example of how I move from something in reference, which at the time would have been someday maybe and note to self and all this sort of stuff, to an actual project in the tool. And then maybe a couple more things, and then I'll see what the questions are. Someone mentioned earlier, I do these tinderbox videos. At any time a viewer emails me an idea or a question, I collect them so that as I create new videos in the future, I'll remember what I might create the videos on, and they'll be in direct response. I can also see the direct email that person sent in order to reference that in context. I do a lot of that, and I'll show you how I handle email in just a second. But for routines, I also wanted to show how a couple things I do. One is I record my bank balance every week, and I went and edited this so it's not there. So I've been doing this since December, and I will put the amount right here so that I can see how it changes week to week, and I'll put anytime there was a big deposit or big subtraction from it, and that's been really nice. I also I have a couple of things bike-wise and garden-wise that I do in OmniFocus. I don't do a lot of daily maintenance stuff. It feels overwhelming to me to have a lot of like make this, do that stuff. But for things that I would definitely forget, I do use it for that. So I know now when to lube the chain or pump the tires or even replace the brake pads. And if it's not time or I check them and it's fine, then I will just defer it. But this has been really great for maintaining my bike, which is my only actually transportation. And the garden, we have a couple of trees that we're concerned about that we're not sure if they're sick or if we need to get them cut down. So we had a tree expert come, and he told us like, well, in 6 months you need to do this, and you should check for sap at this time of year. So I put all of those reminders in OmniFocus so that I know when to look for those things. And I also put notes as to like when the compost is being cooked so that I'll know when it's ready, because the compost is like 2 years it needs to cook. So I know when I'll be able to use stuff like that, which I think is pretty cool. I also do that for people who are important to me, all their birthday cards and presents and all that kind of stuff. I have kind of all mapped out for, repeating year after year after year. Oh, and then one more is that I have a smile file, which I just started a little while ago, which is like people that said really positive things to me, and I'm keeping them in OmniFocus so that I can actually just like I could click on the email and see it again if I wanted to. So email, I actually created, I didn't empty my inbox so that I could show you how the process looks. I use mailmate to process my email. So these two messages here need to go into OmniFocus. So I have a shortcut. It's a Control-Shift-A, which opens up a little submenu, and I can add to either DevonThink or OmniFocus. And I actually just add, I do 3 instead of add with summary. And so I just say save. That's my process. I do that anytime, and then I hit E to get rid of it, and I keep a very, very low inbox all the time. I'm not putting this message in OmniFocus because it's the kind of message I could do in 2 minutes or less. I'm just going to do it in a minute. But anyway, so then it goes to my inbox. So here are 5 inbox items. I didn't clear anything out this morning and prep for this. And so these three are emails. And so I will, what I'll do is, and this is kind of where the redundancy comes in, but I will actually put an emoji, which is the nature of the communication. And I'll say something like, reach out to Gabby, because I know what this is about. And I'll put it in the right project. And in this case, the project is course prep for my summer class. I'll tag an email, and then I'll defer it to today, because I need to do that today. This one, I don't need to change the name of the task, and it is probably more like being a good colleague, and it's email, and that I would like to do today as well. And then this one is about a board that I'm on, and it's an email, and I could probably do this one on Sunday. And a lot of times I will just batch emails I don't need to answer every day to Sunday, and I have a reminder in OmniFocus that says process any emails that you want to do today. So that's what that would look like, and I would clean that out. Now we can look at the messages perspective that I have. And so this shows me 4 emails that I should have sent yesterday, 4 that I need to send today, and the emails and also letters and stuff that I have coming up. So this perspective, it looks at anything that's tagged with my tag medium and is remaining, and it's organized by defer date. And so, so my medium tags, I'll go over to tags so you can see, are emails, letters, phone calls, and text messages. So this is actually where I do all of my emailing, and I can just, let's see, something that would be something I could, this could probably do this. I'll just do caps lock G, and that will open up the email that I have from this person, and I can just answer it there. So I can very easily process my emails that way.
And I'm seeing some questions rolling in, and I always like to throw in a few of my own as well too. One question I have in general is, so if you have like a someday maybe item, for instance, once that's checked off, is that something you might refer to in the future, or is checking off an idea or someday maybe a signal that you've either looked at it and dealt with it, or you've moved the information somewhere else like tinderbox? Or just curious a little bit more about the process there.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of someday maybe. I say that, let's see. So I have a lot of notes to self. Someday maybe, this is my whole of the someday maybe. And so some of them are like, here's an Omni outliner document, or here's a task paper document with some thoughts about this. And some are an idea that that I will just turn into a task. So like make turkey stock is a thing that will get someday maybe taken away from it, and then it will be just something I can do because it exists in a file, I mean in a project that's alive. But then there's the someday maybe reference project in which those things actually get turned into a project that's more robust. I try to keep someday maybe really, I'm very judicious about it because I feel like it used to be a problem for me and became quite overwhelming, so I don't do a lot of someday maybes. But I do a ton of notes to self. I mean, you know, there's a lot of notes to self in this, right? And all of those notes I think is a potential vulnerability of my system, in that I don't always, like, I have had a lot of notes to self and interesting stuff going on in the general exam, and I'll certainly have a lot right now with the class and then the proposal for my dissertation, all these different things. And once it's done in OmniFocus, it's not anywhere else. And so it's like, I really look at the tool as this like boost to my short-term working memory, but it's not a long-term memory tool. At the same time, it's pretty much a memory and context of things that needs to be done. And so I'm not terribly concerned that I'm going to like regret not having that memory anymore once the thing is done.
Right.
But it's a trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like it gets things into your system very quickly, and then you have a very systematic way for going through those ideas and kind of batching that work and saying, I've got 30 ideas in the last week, let me just go through them and move some of them onto tinderbox or something like that. And
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also, I would like to say, something that you may have noticed in the words that I've used for some of these things, you'll see it's kind of weird language. So, like, question, who have you enjoyed interacting with, is totally different than bring more stationery to school, which is very imperative, versus don't forget to drink that champagne, or we wanted to make a video. And so there's this this conversation every time I enter a task in the OmniFocus, not when I'm entering it into the inbox, but when I'm processing the inbox. I reword a lot of my task so that they feel like the pantry I mentioned before, in that I look at it and I think I have agency in this moment to agree with my former self about what I should be doing. And my present self, when she's processing that inbox, I'm thinking, how can I be kind and considerate to my future self so that she feels agency and the ability to decide in that moment what really matters and likes what she has to do and feels like there's a lot of opportunity. I think it's especially important because we're using this tool. It's a computer. It's our phones and our iPads and our laptops, and I don't want a computer commanding me to imperative, do this, do that, do the other, even if it was me. And so I'm trying to kind of be a messenger between me and my former and future self, so that I can prevent OmniFocus and that kind of, like, I call it whack-a-mole. It's just like, I got to get this done, I got to get that done. But there are exceptions, and I don't do it all the time. Like, bring more stationery to school is an imperative. I didn't add that. You wanted to bring more stationery to school. Yeah. So it's not 100% consistent.
Yeah, okay. I love the whole pantry metaphor there too. And I think in general, if a system isn't attractive, then it's almost like it's creating stress. It's instead of really living up to its sort of intended purpose. And I love how you use you make very good use of emojis in there too. That tends, when I look at it, it brings a lightness to it. It gives it a visual impact, and especially the little hands. I remember seeing that on your website before we even spoke for the first time. So that there's something about it that just personalizes it, and the names you used. It's like your OmniFocus setup, I think, has character. It's got personality. So there's something about that I'm definitely really drawn to. I'm sure many others are as well. Talking about emojis, there's a few questions about how you did the colon, and I believe that's an app called Rocket. I use that as well too. Yes,
that's Rocket. I used to use what's the text expander for all my emoji. It comes with a blanket set of snippets, but once I got used to using them in Slack, and Rocket sort of mimics that Slack behavior, I decided to switch over to Rocket. Yeah,
it's a great app, and there's a free version, and you can spend a little money and get all the bells and whistles, which I think is well worth it.
One thing that I would like to share is a bit about my bullet journal and how I use that in tandem with OmniFocus. I took a couple of pictures from my bullet journal, and for those that are kind of stationary nerds, what I use for my bullet journal these days, this is my third, is a black and red notebook. They are, there's a reason I use it. One, I bike everywhere, as I said, and they're very sturdy. I don't need to, when I'm on the ferry, for example, I don't need to be at a desk to be able to write on it because it's got a very firm hard back. But the thing that I really like about it is the rule. It's a wider rule, and I want to write quickly a lot of the times because I often take reading notes in my my notebook. So I want to make sure that I can write quickly, and I feel like the Luke term's great quality, but its rule and its dot grid rule is too narrow for me. It's too short. So this here is a snapshot from my notes from June 17th when I was having a Zoom meeting for this board that I'm on. And then here are some notes from June 18th, yesterday, and a meeting I was having with my TA. And so I just wanted to kind of show you the way that, first off, this stuff's really messy. But what happens in these meetings is that I will just create notes. Some of the notes are observations, like Nina said, juicy and chaotic learning, and I thought that was a neat phrase, so I just wrote it down. This little, it says readiness question mark, and it has an X through it. That was a dot, and that was a question I wanted to ask in that call. And so I wrote readiness so that I would remember my question. Some more notes. You'll see here, there is something that says, don't forget about Fetzer, and it has a caret, like just a half of an X there, and that was a dot, and then I turned it into an OmniFocus task, and I know that it's an OmniFocus task because it has, I'll zoom in a bit, it has this this caret here. So today, with these notes from yesterday's meeting, these X's, a string of X's, was stuff that I took care of in the meeting. But every one of these things that's a dot, putting the outcomes for the rubric, adding something to the map assignment, putting dates on the grading, all of these different things are things that will go into OmniFocus. So I will either do them right away because they're really easy, or I will type them into my OmniFocus. And when I do, I will put this little symbol showing myself that I've processed that and I don't need this piece of paper anymore. And so I just wanted to kind of show you that's what I do. I do the same thing with reading notes. If I am, reading something and I need to either put it in my Zettelkasten and tinderbox, or if I need to follow up with reading a different article because of the one that I just read, I'll put a bullet, and that will be my indicator that I need to do something with it. Otherwise, it just stays as a sort of short-term memory device.
Oh, very cool. The question from Keith, just something to clarify, what's the difference between a dot for OmniFocus versus a caret for OmniFocus? So that indicates you've added it, is my understanding.
That's right. So
yeah,
everything that needs to be done is a dot. Anything that I would want to just remember is a dash. And then I can go through and see all the dots, and I can decide to do a dot without ever putting it into OmniFocus, in which case it would get an X. Or I would do the caret, and that would mean it's no longer being tracked on this piece of paper. It's now being tracked in OmniFocus.
Yeah, okay, great, yeah. And I've been in so many meetings where I've seen people writing in their books knowing that they're never going to look at it again. So I think it's, it's great to have a very systematic way of taking those paper-based notes and getting all the advantages of paper, but still moving things in. And I guess there's kind of almost like a bit of a gatekeeper in between too, because you can decide if something is actually worthy of your time and attention and everything. So, whereas if it goes straight into OmniFocus, then
and I've been working on how to combine the paper and the digital, and I have tried, I feel like, everything, including completely digital bullet journals we were talking about at the very beginning of the call. And this is the thing that works for me. And so that little caret, that one little bullet addition made a big difference. And I mostly work out of OmniFocus. That's the other thing I was going to mention, is that I generally Pomodoro my day, and I will create my plan, my Pomodoro plan in the notebook, but I decide, and everything right now is really just managed by OmniFocus.
And when you do start a Pomodoro session, or you're getting down to work, what would be your criteria for deciding what to focus on next, given that there's probably 100 different directions you could go in any given moment?
Yeah, so right now I am, so I do a weekly review every week, These are my weekly review items. And I'll go through each one of these stepwise, and at the very end, I flag tasks that I want to remember. So I will often work out of that flagged perspective to decide what belongs in the Pomodoro. I used to do very like what's that called, like hyper scheduling or something. I used to do very, very booked, but that was not. That did not create the kind of opportune pantry-like experience. It felt really just like I had no control anymore. So I don't do that anymore, and I just look at this flag perspective for the things I might want to do, and I decide in my very first Pomodoro of the day what the rest of the Pomodoros are going to be. And
so it's essentially like a planning Pomodoro is, so
yes.
you're okay. Yeah, I like that, because it's very intentional about, the goal is not to do the work, but to plan the work, and planning the work is work within itself. And
yes.
so, yeah.
And the other thing that's nice about Pomodoro is I have a Slack channel with several other PhD students, and we Pomodoro together. So we have all of this process around jumping on each other's Pomodoros with different emojis in Slack and indicating when a break is and when it's not a break and that sort of stuff. So we've got this nice language that we use with each other. And so I can always kind of have some accountability for Pomodoroing. It feels like it makes a big difference to do it with a group of people.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I don't remember the name offhand, but I remember Chris Bailey was talking about a service on his new podcast where you're actually video conferenced with someone that could be in like Sweden or something like that. And you just talk briefly at the beginning to set your intention for the hour, and then you say what you did at the end, but then you're both on video doing your work. And
cool. Yeah.
And he was talking about how it was just so effective to kind of have somebody else there doing work at the same time, even if you don't really interact with them. So
yeah,
sounds somewhat similar in the approach.
Yeah. Another thing that I do that helps me kind of just get to work is I use the app Freedom, and I have a few automatic sessions, recurring sessions, I think is what they're called. So every day from 7 a.m. until maybe 11 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Freedom is working so that I can't look at Twitter or anything interesting. And then it starts up again at night from 7 p.m. until way after I go to bed, so that everything, including some apps like Slack and Reader and things that I might go to, they all get shut down as well. And then for forums, which I felt were becoming too distracting for me, I've actually set it so that like Freedom is running so that I don't check. For the last few weeks, Freedom's been running, so I don't check the forums at any time until Sunday. But I have switched it to having like a 30-minute to an hour-long window in the middle of the day right now, mostly because I need to change the Freedom rules. So because when Freedom's running, I can't change Freedom at all. So it actually just gives me a window to be able to edit Freedom if I need to, because I've done it so I can't quit it and I can't use activity monitor. It's pretty much Fort Knox.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Freedom. I haven't checked it out extensively.
It's a good.
It definitely piqued my curiosity.
Yeah.
Question from Tim, not me, another Tim. Interested in avoiding all the maintaining no doing syndrome. Can you describe how frequently you look at note to self tag reviews, how much time you spend in tinderbox relative to OmniFocus?
So make sure that I understand the question. Is it in general, am I actually looking at the note to selves?
Yeah, I guess it's the way I read it. It's like how frequently do you look at those notes, and how much time are you actually spending in OmniFocus versus things like tinderbox? And
yeah. So, one thing that I've noticed in the OmniFocus community is that there tends to be this statement that a lot of people make. It's like, I don't spend a lot of time in OmniFocus. I spend a lot of time doing things. Like that would be the ideal. And I have this sort of view of a good example would be, let's say you're at a conference and you go into a session that is not good. And so you say, I feel kind of obligated. I guess I should stay in the session. I don't want to leave. Or you say, the session's not for me. I'm going to get up and go and find a better session. This common thing. To me, I see a lot of value. I see life lived in every single choice you make. You could stay in the room and there would be life. You could go to a different session and there would be life. And I don't make a distinguishing judgment about how much time I'm spending in OmniFocus versus how much time I'm spending in any other app, because it's all me spending my time, me living my life. I really am more just, am I being consciously aware that it's a miracle that I'm alive in the first place? So I don't have any, I feel like I spend a fair bit of time in OmniFocus. I don't have any worries about minimizing that time. I look at these notes to self a lot. I feel like I'm very grateful for them. I like looking at my syllabus, like I can't imagine what it would have been had I not collected all of those notes. And I like that relationship that I develop between myself to be remembering and telling all the time. So I am often just clicking on this and scrolling through and remembering things and then moving on, or obviously quick capturing and remembering something and then moving on. So I'd say I spend a lot of time doing stuff like that. Tinderbox, it's a very active, creative space for me. I don't kind of like navigate it and traverse it like I navigate and traverse OmniFocus as I just described. So for example, if I go to a different tinderbox, let's say Zettelkasten, I have this kind of big time collection of notes that I've made about all sorts of things. So for example, I map out various theoretical frameworks I discover, and I create notes about what they mean, and I can remember all of that and jump around to different, just this whole world of the Zettelkasten and tinderbox. But I don't just go and view it. What I do is I'm writing something and I need to like remember the essence of what, this one concept was, and I go find that concept in my Zettelkasten and I grok it, and I might, traverse the grok, and then I go and continue writing. Similarly, I wanted to pull up this one. I needed to figure out, after looking at about 20 different papers, how they differed and aligned with how they defined the word contemplation. And so I had, it was just a complete thinking space as to color coding and figuring out and being very messy until I got a sense of the commonalities and differences. And then I went over here and I articulated what those were. And then I went into a different realm and I started mapping a whole bunch of different examples across some spectrum. So I figured out that like one difference was that some people find contemplation a mystery and some people find it really measurable. And so in that, well, these are the papers and examples of the mystery, and here are the papers and examples of the measurable, and just allowed me to, look at it in a whole bunch of different ways so that I could make sense of it. Then I went back to the Google Docs for the paper I was writing, and I continued on. I have another one here, I think this one, where I was trying to map papers. Maybe it's a different one. Hold on a second. And just to understand the relationship between papers. There it goes. Yeah. So I was in DevonThink, and I dragged a whole bunch of DevonThink papers into Tinderbox. And when you do that, it actually puts the first page of the PDF. So it looks like I have this desktop with a whole bunch of papers on it. And so I started to just create relationships between the different papers that I had so that I could better understand how they agreed or disagreed with each other. And then I went back to the writing. So I really feel like tinderbox is like the table saw of my little workshop. It's a kind of a dangerous tool that I just really go to and use very specifically for this sort of sense making work, and then I use that intelligence or clarity that I've come to in the other thing I'm doing.
Okay, very cool. Yeah. Just a few more questions. Some of these are related too. So Stacy says these are some interesting ideas. I hadn't thought of using OmniFocus as a study partner. When you include the questions for the general exam, how would you review these? How would you review those? Sorry. And there's a second part also for the bibliography. Did you just copy and paste? So just getting down to, I guess, the mechanics of the system.
Yeah. So the first question is about
the general exam.
General exam.
Yeah.
So are you asking, was it this one here? So how I revisited the stuff in OmniFocus, or how I revisited the stuff in tinderbox?
So this was around the, when you include the questions for the general exam. So I think those are the ones that are actually in OmniFocus.
Okay.
So what's your process for reviewing those?
Yeah. So what I did was, as I kind of similar to the example of creating the syllabus, as I was studying for the general exam, anytime an interesting question came up to me as to something that I might want to write about for the actual exam, and I didn't have control over what I'd write about, but I still wanted to kind of think in those terms and prepare in those ways, I would create it in this writing prompts folder, and then I would I actually would go through, there's a Center for Faculty Diversity or something like that that has writing challenges, like 14-day writing challenges. And so I would, I'd go through, and every day I would pick a different prompt and I would write on it. And I found that to be incredibly productive. Additionally, at the end, when it came time for my committee to ask the questions, I collected all of these questions and used that to say, here's some examples of the things that I've been thinking about, just so you know. The questions they ended up asking me weren't exactly these questions, but I think sharing these questions with them was a good way for them to understand what would work best for me, because the questions they asked were wonderful for my increasing my learning, and I think that giving them where my brain was headed really helped with that. What was the second part of the question?
So the second part was around the bibliography. If you just copy and pasted that into OmniFocus, or
what did I do? I think that, so my my reference management stuff, I use a tool called Paperpile, and I also use DevonThink, and I also use Bookends. So I have a really redundant system, but what happens is that I find Paperpile to be really, really great at capture. So anytime I find anything interesting at all, I put it in Paperpile. So I've got 864 papers right now, and they're just all sorts of interesting things. And then the PDFs download automatically into Paperpile, and when they do, I have a Hazel rule that puts them in a folder that I call Flattened Paperpile. Don't know if there's anything in that folder right now. No, there's nothing in it. Every week I have a note in my weekly review to go and put anything that's Flattened Paperpile into DevonThink. And so then in DevonThink, I have every single paper I have ever found at all interesting. So we go to articles. Here are all my articles. And I can search these articles for something like, you know, maybe I'm interested in neurofeedback. I can search all the articles to see the ones that have something to do with neurofeedback, and including the ones that I had never collected because I was searching for neurofeedback. I might have searching for something completely different. I have it all in there, and that's where I can link to it in OmniFocus. And then once I actually read something, I put it into Bookends. And I actually drag the reference from Bookends into Tinderbox when I want to put it into Zettel Custom, because when you do that, it creates a whole bunch of metadata with it. So why do I do all of that? I do it because I think that PaperPile excels at finding PDFs and ease of add, and it's also really easy to send a citation to someone or collect a bunch of list references and send them. But I don't like that you can only use Google Docs with it, and it's a online only kind of tool and that sort of stuff. So so I don't want to use it for everything. And when I put all of these papers into DevonThink, I get my own little mini Google Scholar that I can search. And it's been wonderful, not only for doing something like this neurofeedback search, I can search for authors and citations that way, but it also is great for their See Also feature, the Magic Hat formerly. So that said, what I probably did was I probably copied the citations from PaperPile into OmniFocus. This reading list was, tons of different iterations before I actually got down to the actual reading list. So it was like an evolution. It wasn't just like I had collected it somewhere, copied and pasted, and then started reading. And I even created a matrix Omni outliner document that had it had each reading in one column, and then in another column it had the tinderbox map, if there was one, and in another column it had where my reading notes were. Like it would say something like, book number 9, page, 84, and then I knew where the reading notes were, and it also had the PDF in DevonThink, and so I had a way to be able to find everything I had about a specific reading at a glance.
Okay, perfect, Tim. Yeah, I think that's a good example where you're using multiple tools that have overlap in functionality, and you're drawing the best features from each one and not trying to do everything in one. So yeah. It sounds like that's, yeah, okay. A lot of fans of your use of language. Yeah, that definitely resonates with me as well. So sometimes it's easy to get stuck in, like, this is the way I'm supposed to create a task or a project or something like that. But I think a certain amount of creativity allows that individuality to come out, and you've just demonstrated that beautifully. Do you happen to have any suggestions on a Windows alternative to tinderbox? I realize some people in their work environment maybe don't have access to a Mac. Anything to suggest there that you've come across?
Well, so I think that there are official answers for this, and I don't know for sure, but maybe Connected Text or the Brain. I might be wrong about their Windows-ness. But something that I think is if you can handle the pixelation, and you just sort of have to put it in your mind that you're just traveling back in time to one of those old school monitors we used when we were a kid. There is a wonderful tool called CMap Tools, stands for Concept Map Tools. The reason it's wonderful, it's not wonderful in the way that tinderbox is wonderful, but it's wonderful in the way that it helps you understand what a concept map should be. I think that a lot of the tools that we're using now, MindNode and all the different ones that are really popular, they are about this sort of like, let me think all the things, and you just do a lot of associating and you list a lot of stuff, but you're not actually conceptually relating things to one another. You're just kind of going through the daisy chain of the synapse in your brain that says this is related to this, is related to this, but you're not doing the intelligence of how it's related. And CMap Tools, it bakes it in. Like, to create a file, you have to list the question that you're answering, and to create 2 nodes, you have to annotate their link. And so I feel it's a really good tool for practicing the muscle of the conceptualization of whatever it is that you're trying to map, so that then whatever tool you use is more useful. So to me, tinderbox is great because it's got this sort of like infinite depth. You can just drill down, and you have this visual layer that's just really great for me personally. I like to map things out visually, but there's probably a lot of tools that would get you there. The thing that's most valuable to me is that I'm using it to really draw out that concept, and then I feel like I've got that to understand and re-understand and re-understand the concept, as I will inevitably forget it. I've just given up on like remembering things. I do a lot of, like, I have an Anki app on my phone to like remember the names of my students before the class begins. And I just use a lot of memory aids because I don't think that it's like, you know, I mean, we lose some of that ability as we age, but I think that this is one of the real strengths of these tools, is to just augment and help us remember things. So I kind of max them out that way.
Yeah, and just see them more objectively because they're externalized, and it sounds like there's a real iterative quality to your process too.
Yes,
it's not like you sit down and figure it out on a Saturday afternoon. You're
that's absolutely
potentially going for weeks or months and allowing things to feed into it without. I think that's sometimes the pressure we put on ourselves, is we need to figure it out all at once. And I know for myself as well, sometimes I'm planning a course or something and it might happen over 6 months, and I'll just be in a yoga class or something and an idea will pop into my head. So, so I think the key, and something you've got a great system for, is what to do with that stuff, which is where I think people almost start to see ideas as a curse at some point, because it's like I have nowhere to put these things. Whereas, that's one thing I really appreciate about your system, your process, is you've really thought through, what am I going to do with these sort of random ideas that are inevitably going to show up. Okay, let's just see. I think I got to most of the questions here. Let me just give another little scan through. Yeah, definitely some fans of the areas of possibility, and I love that. I think I might have to create one for myself as well. I do find the areas of responsibility or focus useful, but there's something very sort of future looking about areas of possibility, and more. It's more creative. I guess it's something that's being invented versus kind of mapping out what already exists.
Yeah. I mean, your own story, Tim, is one of the, the inspirations for that. In that, it's just like looking at our living into a self or a state that you want to, and having the tools support you in that. I actually blogged about the areas of possibilities, and I blogged about creating kinder to-do list, which is that sort of conversation between future and past selves. So if you go to my blog, you can see both those posts and kind of see the process I took. Like, because I even say, like, if I were to use areas of responsibilities, here's what it would look like. Using areas of possibilities, this is what it looks like. Kind of illustrate that.
Do you use active links between OmniFocus and tinderbox?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do. I use a lot of links, of course, between mailmate and OmniFocus, and DevonThink and OmniFocus, but I also will link directly to maps in tinderbox, and sometimes I will use Hook to link things, but I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be using Hook, so I don't do it religiously. Yeah,
Hook's one I've been looking at. Actually, know the fellow who's based here in Vancouver that's developing it, so we've exchanged many emails and had some really good chats about it. So awesome. Hook is basically a way of linking multiple things together. So if you were doing a PhD dissertation or something like that, you could have a link to all the folders and web articles and things that would go into that, and without having to sort of manually figure out ways to have URLs. It's almost a bit hard to describe. I think I'll be doing a Learn OmniFocus video on it before too long, once it's officially released, because it is a very clever way of associating things. And in the meantime, anytime you can include a link to anything, whether it's Tinderbox or Google Docs, something that'll take the friction away. As soon as I find this for myself anyway, as soon as I need to go searching for something to like update a document or something like that, the chance that I'll actually make it to that document is greatly reduced, versus if I can just click on a link and add a few notes or comments and go back to what I was working on. It's much more attractive, much more efficient. Yeah,
I agree.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Beck, for being here today, and I really appreciate everything you shared. I'm looking forward to going through the recording of this so I can revisit some of these ideas, and definitely will be integrating some of these into my own OmniFocus system and productivity system in general. And thanks to everyone who was here for the live session. I really appreciate all the great questions and sharing. And if you're watching a recording of this, thanks very much for tuning in. And hope to see you all again soon. Take care.
Bye, everyone.